Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We are here to discuss my top 10 third-party risks from a supply chain management perspective. So if you'll do the next slide, Melissa, please. So in case you are wondering who I am, as Melissa said, I am the Supply Chain and Strategic Sourcing Director for Pelco Products. And Pelco Products is the nation's leading traffic and utility hardware solutions provider. So anything at an intersection, except for the traffic signal heads, we build, manufacture, source, and put that together for customers nationwide, into Canada, a little bit in Mexico, and some minor overseas locations. So my background, I actually started off 6.5 years in the Air Force as an acquisitions officer, dealing with contracts management, supply chain management, purchasing on behalf of the U.S. Air Force. Once I exited the Air Force, I spent time in the defense industry, the energy industry, even did a little bit of my own consulting, and am currently in manufacturing, or as I like to say, the Oklahoma trifecta. Those of you who don't know, Oklahoma has those basically energy, defense, and manufacturing. So I've got Oklahoma covered. I am based out of Oklahoma City, a suburb there. It's a great place to raise a family and enjoy being out there. If you're ever in town, look me up. Next slide, please. So why are we here? If you don't know by now, supply chain risks are everywhere. And it took a global pandemic for supply chain to kind of have its moment. I don't know about y'all, but for the last 3 years, I have not had to explain what a supply chain manager does. Prior to that, I was always, is it logistics? Is it procurement? A little bit of both, all of the above. Well, now everybody knows what a supply chain is and how difficult it is to manage. So as we get a more and more complicated supply chain, there's risks that are inherent to that supply chain, and that managing and mitigating those risks is falling increasingly to the procurement and supply chain side of the house to manage. So we have to identify those risks and figure out ways to mitigate them at our companies. So, next slide, please, Melissa. So I have identified within Pelco and kind of some of my other experiences what our top supply chain risks are, and I have categorized them in 3 basic groupings: ESG, environmental, societal, and governance / geopolitical, supplier related, and technology related. And we'll go into each of kind of my main bullet points with those and give you some examples of what I am facing and how I have addressed them, and hopefully give you some ideas for ways that you can address them yourselves. The next slide, please. First of all, one of the most important things is identifying your risks and identifying the impact, assessing the impact to your organization. So in order to do this, I use a risk matrix. This is a fairly common matrix that's out there. I did not create it. I will not take credit for that, but it is a great tool that's available. I highly encourage that if you are not using this, that you start doing this as in your careers or to your leadership, as you work to understand the impacts to your supply chain. I use a 1 to 5 and an A to E scale. So if you'll notice, kind of down the left-hand side and across the top, you have the probability that an event will occur, and then the impact to your business, and then with varying degrees of acceptability there in the matrix itself. So if you find yourself falling into an AE, for example, high likelihood that it's going to occur, or sorry, and a 5E, a 5 being the most likely to occur and E with the largest impact, then obviously that's one that needs to be addressed immediately, is considered an unacceptable risk, and you need to address that immediately. And then moving down to the down towards the lower left, you can assess your risks and how they impact your business. So if you're not using a risk matrix, I strongly encourage you to start doing so. Feel free to take this and run with it once these slides come out. Next slide, please. So as you can see, my first kind of category is ESG and geopolitical. It's a little bit of a hot button topic these days, but regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum or your organization or your state, you will have to deal with these in some form or fashion. So for Pelco and for some of the other companies that I worked with in the past, it's that old real estate adage: location, 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 right? We have the bulk of our overseas manufacturing is either in Taiwan and China. And I don't know if you're paying attention to the news, but Taiwan and China are somewhat adversarial, have a somewhat adversarial relationship. And so I have assessed, I had to put together an assessment package for the manufacturers that we have in China and what the impact is to the business and what would happen, what is a best guess of what would happen should China decide to act unfavorably towards Taiwan. Furthermore, Pelco, being a small Oklahoma company, started out as a small Oklahoma company. We have a lot of suppliers that have grown with us, and we have suppliers all over the place, not always in easily accessible locations. We also ourselves are in an area that it's in the middle of the country, and it's far more accessible than people realize, but it's not always, there's not major air traffic into and out of the airport. So we have started to look at ways to diversify our supplier base, right? So with our overseas impact, one of our mitigation tools is nearshoring, and how we've identified potential products that we can bring back to either Mexico or to the United States. However, there is a cost to that, a tooling cost, a cost of doing business in the United States that is higher. So all of that has to be factored in and considered in your evaluation. Furthermore, we are looking for secondary suppliers for all of the items that we make overseas, just in case. We've determined a possible source and have put the parameters in place to move forward should we need to do so. As far as the remote areas outside of major transportation corridors, we also have begun to find secondary sources more accessible. Another ESG or geopolitical consideration is climate. We are increasingly experiencing extreme weather events. As such, we have decided to start identifying secondary suppliers. Our main foundry is in a town 120 miles from us that is very potentially exposed to a tornado. So if that were to happen, it would devastate our business. And so we've begun to identify secondary suppliers for the product lines that foundry makes for us. We're also experiencing, I hate the word unprecedented, but it's apt in this case, unprecedented conditions within the ocean-going freight business. And so making sure that you have favorable FOB terms to help mitigate some of the risk on that, your exposure there. As far as business practices go, how your business is set up and who you deal with is going to dictate a lot of your risk here. For example, we are a private equity owned company, and how we moved from a family owned to a private equity owned company, and how they manage our cash flow is different. Now we had to renegotiate our AP terms and contract language with our leading suppliers to ensure that we kept material flowing on time when we needed it, but also made sure that we were not putting ourselves in a cash crunch. Part of that risk mitigation also is to make sure that we have MSAs, master supply agreements or material supply agreements, and contracts in place with our entire supply base. If you don't have those, that's a huge risk for you, and I would encourage you to start working on that immediately. In the regulatory reality, we do import quite a bit from China, and so we are dealing with Buy America Act and tariffs on materials coming in. Pelco sells to distributors who sell into states and municipalities and are subject to, in some cases, federal funding requirements and restrictions around the component materials that can go into our various products. So we have to account for that. We have to either have domestic sources, we have to be willing to accept or pass on the tariff costs. And we also are encouraging our customers and their customers to really understand what the intent of some of these acts are, rather than maybe strict compliance, where you can still meet all of the requirements of the law, but not necessarily have to be so draconian that it makes it impossible to do business. And that's going to depend entirely on the sophistication of you and your customers and your suppliers. Next slide, please. As far as risk related to suppliers, Pelco is a commodity driven supply base. We buy a lot of aluminum, a lot of steel, and we are subject to commodity indices. And what historically we had not done a very good job of managing our risks around that. We did not have price protections in with our suppliers. And so one of my primary focuses has been to make sure that any supplier that provides metal to us, we have protection, economic price adjustment clauses around how much they can charge based on commodity fluctuations. We also did not have a proactive pricing policy with our customers to respond to those price increases, and I worked with our sales team to ensure that we did capture those impacts and address them within our customer base accordingly. Furthermore, we did not have an S&OP process, a sales operations planning process. Sometimes you hear it SIOP, sales inventory operations planning process. We implemented that with Pelco to understand better forecasting with our suppliers and impact of the ability to do business based on our increased costs. Along that same lines, our material providers experienced quite a few disruptions throughout the pandemic. And in some cases, some of the raw material or feedstock that we use is no longer available, or a foundry may stop production. That has forced us to find substitutes or discontinue items, much to the unhappiness of our sales force and our customers. But if I can't get it, I can't sell it. And so understanding that throughout the enterprise has been a little bit of a challenge that we've managed through, but it's a risk for your company. You could lose customers over that. You have to be prepared for that. You may not be able to switch products very easily. We are in a regulated business, and state regulators don't always move very quickly. So you could potentially lose out on a sale. Another risk that I deal with quite frequently is logistics challenges and disruptions. Truck and rail availability has gone back and forth throughout the last couple of years in terms of just availability with transportation to and from the ports, as well as the ports themselves. One of our kind of not so successful success stories was due to 90-day or longer 120-day lead times from overseas, we had a rhythm of ordering in order to we had each month we had placed large orders to bring material in overseas. All of a sudden, the port time condensed on both ends and the sailing time condensed. We got 6 months worth of material coming in our building, completely unexpected, unprepared for it, and are now trying to work through that. So in some cases, being proactive from the supply chain side has had some unintended consequences on the backside. So just something to be aware of as you're managing through the challenges over dealing with importing material. Pardon me. One of the last challenges that I'm seeing supply rate is disruption and concentrations. We have a high number of products that are concentrated with 4 or 5 primary suppliers, and if any one of those suppliers were to have a significant disruption, it would severely impact our business. That's probably, I would say that's a 3E type scenario, referring back to that matrix. And my team has worked diligently to diversify our supply base, increase our safety stock numbers, and negotiate longer lead times with our customers. Next slide, please, Melissa. And last but not least, in my bucket of supply chain risks that I'm actively managing, these are relatively new for Pelco to deal with. The transportation industry is not particularly progressive when it comes to technology, and it's just a slow-moving industry, slow to adopt, slow to bring new technology online. We recently experienced a case of fraud. A vendor, and I use the term in quotes because it was a spoofed email address, went to our AP team requesting us to change a bank account. We did so in good faith, and as it turns out, that was a spoof, and so we had to scramble to try to pull back payment, work with the supplier to understand what happened, notify the supplier, and work with them to get that problem fixed. Because of that, as a mitigation tool, we put new controls in place and validation of changes. So through our ERP contact list and through our purchasing team. And so any request will come in, the purchasing team will validate with their contacts at the suppliers. And if it came, especially if it came from an address outside of our ERP system, if it came from an outside address, we're not going to consider it. It has to come from an ERP address, which is a mitigation tool for us. So if you're using an ERP, I would encourage you to keep your contacts up to date and active. Be talking to your vendors, make sure that you have AP contacts, you have purchasing contacts, so that you can validate any requests like this. It also has forced better coordination with my team, with our AP team, and understanding, hey, we're not just operating in a vacuum here. We're not just going to change supplier information just because we got a request to do it. So that's a good outcome of this. Unfortunately, we're still working through this and trying to make sure that Pelco is protected, but at the same time, our vendor gets paid and gets us the material we need. And even more recent incident, not so much at Pelco, but ones that I have dealt with in the past, as cybersecurity. We're increasingly in a connected technological world that makes it's very easy to do our jobs. It is also very easy to get exposed or get hacked, and especially when I was in the defense industry, this is a huge focus for federal government and defense industry companies, as you deal with programs that are of interest to bad actors, you want to be able to protect yourself. So implementing IT requirements, two-factor authentication is critical to maintaining safety within your cybersecurity world. Also within your intellectual property. If you have any intellectual property out there, making sure that you're protected both overseas and domestically, having contract language in place, having non-disclosure agreements. These are easy risk mitigation tools that are critical to protecting your data and your intellectual property. In the warehousing side and logistics, we are moving to RFID and QR codes to ease our receiving process and our inventory management process. So making sure that your network within your warehouse or within your inventory control environment is safe and secure. Because of that, we had to update routers and Wi-Fi and firewalls. And these are things that a typical supply chain manager might not be thinking about. But as you go down this path, it's something you're going to have to address. Can your IT hardware handle the new infrastructure environment? Is it going to require capital investments? Is it going to require retraining from your workforce? Not every workforce is completely tech savvy, and we're experiencing that. We're a manufacturer, a pretty old school manufacturer in a lot of ways. And so as we introduce new technology, we're having to do some workforce retraining. That impacts your business. That impacts your ability to ship product timely. Now you're having to spend more time retraining, or you have turnover because individuals don't want to learn the new way of doing business. So all of these things are risks to identify and mitigate through your companies, through your processes, and through your leadership structure. And the key is we cannot be on an island. Purchasing cannot operate on an island. Supply chain cannot operate on an island. You have to coordinate throughout your business, and frankly, neither can any other entity within your organization. So if you are experiencing that, I would encourage you to reach out to your counterparts in different departments, establish that relationship, make sure, even if it's an informal process, hey, when you're setting up a new item in your database, say, make sure I'm communicated in that so I know what to buy, when to buy it. Make sure that you're talking to your AP teams, you're talking to your legal teams if you have them, you're working with your IT team to protect yourself and address your risks. And I would like to say that our job is going to get easier and easier, but I don't think that it will. Technology will make it easier, technology will make it harder, and the risks are going to keep coming at us faster than we can adapt. And the quicker you can see those risks, address them and mitigate them, the less impact it will have on your business. I'd like to thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you gained some information here that's useful. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa for some Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer any questions now or in the future. I've got my contact information's in the slides, and be happy to connect on LinkedIn or send me an email. Any questions you've got, I've got a passion for supply chain risk management. Make sure we do it well, and make sure that you can be the best possible company you can, and not get sideways with any of your suppliers, any of your customers. And so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick. If you do have those questions, throw them in the Q&A. I know I do see a few coming in already, and we'll chip away at those in just a little bit. But I wanted to quickly address how Prevalent's third-party risk management platform, may be for you if you're not already a current customer. Check out the screen. I'm sure that guy's having a blast doing TPRM using our platform. And let's get this started real quick. When we do talk to customers, they touch on these three things. One, they want to get the data they need to make better decisions regarding third parties, whether that's gaining better visibility into other risks that they pose to the organization prior to onboarding, or getting good data on their control environments and then validating those controls with external cybersecurity intelligence. Number 2 is increasing team efficiency and breaking down those silos. I think you said something about a vacuum earlier, Patrick. Same idea. The security team is probably responsible in your organization for performing the assessments and third-party suppliers, but chances are, procurement or risk management or legal or audit all have some say in the matter. So how do you get everyone together in the same solution, looking at the same data to make informed conclusions about their third party? And thirdly, that brings us to evolving and scaling your platform / program over a long period of time, whether that's to accommodate new or fewer vendors, or kind of the longer scale, operation to mature the program over time and bring it up to best practices. So those three things, I'm slurring my words, are the highlights of what customers tell us they want to achieve with their program. Maybe you're in the same boat. So that's where we come in. Let me go ahead and accelerate this slide here so you can see all the, whoa, too far. All the colors. Okay, well, I'm going to get it one day, next time. That is first and foremost to simplify and speed up onboarding with a single source of the truth and the process to onboard and manage a vendor throughout the lifecycle. Giving access to multiple organizations throughout the enterprise, different teams, the data they need to see in its appropriate format in order to make those informed decisions. And as I previously mentioned, everybody's going to need something a little bit different to look at. So you want to make sure that they are seeing just what they need to see and nothing more, nothing less. Let's see what else. Second is to streamline the process and close those gaps in risk coverage. Chances are you probably have a hodgepodge of tools in place right now. Maybe you're using spreadsheets to assess your vendors, trying to line up those with the correct security controls, bringing in a couple of data sources, and we bring that together under one roof and then extend that to pretty much anyone in the organization. So you're viewing and managing risk across the life cycle of that relationship and unifying teams accordingly. And as I mentioned, we address this for every stage of the relationship, from giving you the ability to add automation and intelligence to RFX processes, to giving you a single process and solution for onboarding, contracting, scoring inherent risks, and enabling you to assess your vendors against any number of different risk requirements, from IT security and privacy all the way to ESG or anti-bribery and corruption, with a set of ISO specific assessments built in the platform. As well as helping you with controls mapping and to monitor and validate that information with the multiple different sources of external intelligence. And manage SLAs and performance of those particular vendors beyond just security metrics, and then give you a very prescriptive process to eventually offboard and terminate that vendor once that relationship comes to an end. Let's see. Next, we help to address multiple areas of risk with the prevalent platform. We've kind of bucketed those different risks into these categories, the 6 that you see on your screen here. We address multiple different areas, but also continuous monitoring data that we consume and use to calculate scores. All right. So we deliver a solution that is a combination of our expertise, the data we provide, and then package it in a user-friendly platform for you. And we can do everything from managed services, which includes assessment and remediation of those vendors on your behalf. And we can help you correlate what you find from those assessments with multiple different sources of risk data and intelligence, and then house it all, like I said, in the platform for workflow, reporting, and ongoing management. Again, ultimately, at the end of the day, our goal is to help you manage your third parties, unify your processes, and help you be more prescriptive to grow your program over time. And with all that being said, now would be a really good time. If you do have more questions, throw them in the Q&A. And I will launch our second and last poll. So you'll see that pop up on your screen. Oopsie, there we go. You'll see that coming up on your screen here. Please answer it if you could. I'm curious to know if you are looking to establish or augment a third-party risk program within a year. We're halfway through the year, so maybe 2024 is the year for you. Maybe you're still stuck in spreadsheet jail, Is that working? Let me see. I don't know. I relaunched it and then I relaunched it again. Let me try one more time. Relaunch. Okay, hopefully that's working. Maybe somebody can ping me if it's not. But like I said, I just want to see what's going on. And yep, everyone's saying they can't see it, so I'm not sure. Okay, maybe you can see it now. Let's see. Nope. Well, this is fun. I keep pushing relaunch, so we'll see if that works. And Patrick, in the meantime, I'm going to let you go ahead and check out those questions. I know we do have a few. So someone said it popped up for a second. That's okay. I'll figure that out while Patrick kind of chips away at the questions. I'm going to throw myself on mute. So Patrick, if you're cool with that, looking at the Q&A, I'm going to figure out this poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Okay. So one of the questions we got here is, can you speak to the importance of clearly defining what each of the values in your metrics mean? And that's going to kind of determine, or going to depend on what your business is. So when you look at a likelihood of an event occurring and the impact to the business, you kind of get free rein to assess those risks. And each of the values impact for me, that likelihood of it occurring 1 to 5, and the impact to the business of A through E, or vice versa. How likelihood is a risk going to happen for us? Let's say take a Taiwan vendor, for example. Is it likely that China will decide to take over Taiwan? Well, that depends on your perspective, what data you're looking at, who you get your information from, and what you believe in about that opportunity. And so if you, let's say you rated it a 3 as a likelihood to occur, or maybe a 4, but what is the impact to your business? For us, it would be an E, because 25-30% of our raw material comes from our feeder components, comes from Taiwan. So if that disruption were to completely shut down the ports, then that would be a huge disruption for it. If it were to just be a government change with no impact, then there would be less of an impact to us. So how you determine each of those values is kind of up to you, and what information you're plugging into, and what your line of work is. Hopefully that answered that question. Not sure what the revisit instead of revise question means. So if you wanted to expand on that, whoever asked that question. Relative to the risk matrix, how specific do you define your risks? Challenges are very likelihood in different severity scenarios and events. Higher likelihood of a low impact event, lower likelihood of an higher impact. Right. So that's kind of using that tool, right? If it's a low impact, high likelihood, you may not need as aggressive mitigation as a high impact, high likelihood, or even a high impact, low likelihood event. For us, for example, if our foundry gets hit by a tornado and wipes out our foundry, that's a huge impact to our business. And in living where we live, that likelihood is probably greater than it's not. So we would assess that risk differently than we would our bank being robbed, right? I mean, that's a little bit of a silly scenario, but what I'm saying, I think even though that would be a huge impact, our bank account being hacked, right? That would be a huge impact to our business, but is the likelihood based on our relationship with our financial institution and the security parameters they have in place. You just kind of have to assess that for yourself. Let's see, any tips for reducing isolation between supply chain of new vendors and IT TPVM? For us, procurement owns the supply chain and business review of new vendors. Our IT department owns the IT side of procurement. However, we have been relatively unsophisticated in our approach to that. And so part of my goal is to integrate that. And to me, your IT vendors can be a huge risk, just like your supply chain vendors can be. So to me, I think you shouldn't do that in isolation. You should rely on the individuals that know how to assess risk and identify risk and mitigate it while working with your IT team. Obviously, there's different mitigation tools available to you, and you aren't necessarily the one implementing them, but definitely identifying and capturing them. So as far as reducing the isolation, I think it's incumbent on us to explain the importance of that. Use a tool like that risk matrix to say, hey, if this situation happens, it's going to have a huge impact on our business. And I think we should relook at it as a team. So hopefully that you have a management team that is willing to break those silos down. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like breaking down silos is very difficult, especially from supply chain and IT and folks that have operated in a vacuum. I don't know if that answered the question or not, but hopefully it did. So Billy asks what generative IA is abound. I have not dealt much with generative IA yet. So I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of good guidance around that. I am trying to stay on top of kind of some of the recommendations from the companies that are rolling this out, but it is absolutely a risk that we are gonna have to monitor and be aware of. So sorry, Billy, I don't have specific advice on generative AI, but it's something I'm definitely intrigued to see how we evolve around that. How do you see cybersecurity risk increasing with AI? Yeah, similar there. I think that this is going to be a huge risk for us in the future. Cybersecurity, AI, chat GPT, all of that it's making it very easy for bad actors to gain access to data in ways that we haven't thought of. And IT risk management is a huge field. It's a whole career field, especially around in the financial services and defense industry. They're way further ahead than the manufacturing industry is on this, especially the more traditional manufacturing. So it's something that we're definitely going to be having to stay more aware of in the future. Let's see.
Patrick, I do have another question that popped up actually in the chat. It asks, when you perform assessments for your clients, are you required to have a CDA in place with the company that is being assessed?
So what do you mean by CDA?
Maybe they can clarify in the chat. Let's see.
Make sure we're talking about the same terminology.
No, ABC 123. I'm sure. I just pinged him. Let's see if he can reply. Maybe he stepped away to get coffee. I'm not sure.
Sure. If he means like a non-disclosure act or something like that, we have an NDA with all of our vendors because we have proprietary drawings that we release to them to manufacture our material. So I definitely am a fan of NDAs and contracts in order to protect yourself. That's one of the best risk mitigation tools you can have out there. And you have some legal protection. Yeah, confidentiality agreement. Yep. Perfect. Yeah. No, I definitely want those. Now, from a supplier scorecard perspective and risk assessment, I don't necessarily think that you need one, but if you have someone who is a contract manufacturer or is integral to your business and is doing part of your is key to your business success, absolutely. NDAs, confidentialities, depending on the laws in your state and where you're located, those have varying effects. But I definitely encourage that as a baseline risk management tool to protect yourself even from accidental disclosure.
Perfect. That's all I have in the chat so far. And then I know we do have some more in the Q&A.
Yeah. Like working my way down there. So
yeah, you're doing great.
the number one reason I believe entities fail at assessing third-party risk and supplier risk is just lack of awareness of it being a problem and not focusing on it. One of our big challenges is we run a pretty lean workforce, so my buyers are pulled pretty thin, and they're keeping the lights on and material flowing. They're not necessarily always able to kind of pull their heads up and look at what's going on with their particular vendors, and that's a failure on our part to give them the tools and the ability to do that. So I think risk there is just companies ignoring it or not choosing to focus on it is one of the main reason why we fail at it. I think the companies that do focus on it, both internally or using resources like Prevalent, have a much higher success rate of mitigating their risks than those that don't. Let's see. Okay, so explaining the Ed here. So the importance of explaining the risk matrix to their internal stakeholders. So you're going to have to make the determination of what A through E, what your criteria is in terms of how that impacts your business. For me, E is absolutely shut down the business, can no longer function in any one particular area. It could be a product line. It could be a state that you do business in. It could be I'm no longer able to build what I've always built and sold. So you could lose customers over that. So you're gonna have to determine what A through E means for you. If you are, but E for me is that's the largest impact to the business in terms of what's going to happen, and 5 is the likelihood that it's going to happen, right? So a 5E, that is absolute. You have to address that first foremost before anything else happens. And you might be able to, a 1E might not require quite an immediate attention, and a 5A might not require immediate attention, so it just kind of depends on how you and your leadership team, and don't do this in a vacuum, right? Talk to your leadership, talk to your operations folks, talk to your IT folks, talk to, what is the most important aspects when it comes to shutting our business down? What are the largest impacts? Hopefully that answers your question there, Ed. Would you have any more tips so we don't suffer as possible problems with disruptions and concentration? Yeah, so for us, this is probably our biggest risk, both supplier disruption and concentration with suppliers and product lines that we sell. We created a business around local suppliers, and as we grew, pulled them along with us, and now we're at a point where we are probably outgrowing our supply base. And so this is a huge concentration risk, is probably our biggest risk from a pure manufacturing perspective. And so I've tasked my team to aggressively source alternatives, whether that's and working with our engineering and our product development group to say, okay, this is we make this market basket of products at this one foundry. What are our options? Can we move it? Yeah, there's going to be tooling costs. We need to understand that. And what even options we have out there. Or if you don't have options, then you identify that risk and notify your leadership team that that's a risk that's so far unable to be mitigated, and you work on you just bake it into your financials as a risk through either to your leadership or to if it's family owned, to the family, or if it's investor owned or private or publicly held or whatever, you disclose that as a risk. But concentration, that's a tough one. There are a lot more suppliers out there that can do what you need done than you realize. You just kind of have to think outside the box a little bit. Talk to your sales teams. Hey, what are you guys hearing at your conferences? Talk to other individuals within the industry. I encourage you to network as much as possible. Pelco may have a supplier that manufactures something for us that somebody else could use, or vice versa. We have a foundry working with that absolutely won't touch the aviation industry because of the regulations involved. And so use your networks to find those sources, use your sales teams, use your leadership, the guys that have been in your business for a long period of time, guys and gals that have been in your business for a long period of time. They might have some insight that you didn't always, you didn't realize. And as buyers, like for me, I see us as the inverse of sales guys. We have to be able to communicate effectively and talk to our teams, but also know what's out there, know what our options are. And if I'd encourage you to start getting good at that. And just to be a very successful buyer, you have to be able to deliver options to your business. And so yeah, sorry, the concentration risk is a big one for us. Let's see. A lot of questions around the risk matrix. Hopefully we've identified or addressed those. If you have any more, we've still got a little bit of time left. I'll be happy to answer those. And yeah, Billy, I saw your note there. Yeah, Chat GPT and AI. This is a really fascinating risk and a lot of unintended consequences around this good technology that I think could really create some challenges for businesses going forward.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you have addressed all the open questions in our Q&A, but if you're cool with it, I'm happy to shut things down and then make sure that they have anybody's contact information if that's it. Do you have any last words, or do you want me to go ahead and proceed with that?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Hopefully I gave everyone some good tips or some things to think about. Like I said, this has been a key part of my job for more than 20 years. And I think it is an under-focused on area. Risk management overall is an under-focused area, especially in the supply chain world. IT and defense have been a much more cutting edge when it comes to risk management, but it's definitely something that is going to impact all of us as we get to be a more connected world. Even in our industry, traffic technology is getting more and more connected. So we are going to see new risks as we move forward. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. Melissa, feel free to wrap us up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Patrick, for coming, and thanks everyone for all your questions. And Patrick was kind enough to provide his contact info, or if you can find him on LinkedIn, or if you're in Oklahoma, hit him up there. But in case you have any questions that cross your mind, at a later time. And then I also threw my email in the chat in case you need it. Yeah. Lastly, I hope to see a handful of you in your inboxes and in your voicemail box and maybe even at a future webinar. So thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Bye.